People around you aren't always what they seem. Some smile while they plan, some charm while they control, and some manipulate without anyone noticing. These aren't villains in a story. They are real, everyday humans. Friends, co-workers, partners, leaders. People who move through the world using narcissism, Machiavellian strategy, and psychopathy as invisible tools. This book will show exactly how they think, how they act, and how they quietly shape the lives of everyone around them. You'll hear the patterns, the tactics, and the hidden logic behind their decisions. You'll see why praise, fear, or attention can be used as weapons, and how ordinary people fall into their traps without realizing it. You'll also learn how these traits exist inside you. Everyone has instincts for strategy, control, and self-preservation. The difference is awareness. The difference is knowing when to use these tools, when to resist them, and when to protect yourself. Every story, every example, every explanation in this series is based on real psychology, real behaviors, and real consequences. No fluff, no fantasy, no guessing game. The goal is simple: to give you the knowledge, tools, and insight to recognize the Dark Triad in the world and in yourself, and to stay in control of your life. By the end of this book, you will see the people around you differently. You will see power, manipulation, and charm with clarity. You will understand how the mind works in both darkness and light. And most importantly, you will know how to stay unshakable, aware, and in charge of your own choices. Before we begin, a huge shout out to Ajaxaviga279 for all the incredible comments and support. You're amazing. Now let's dive in. Chapter 1. The Smile That Wasn't Real. Let's rewind the tape. Think about the last time you met someone and thought, wow, this person is incredible. Maybe it was a date, maybe it was a new boss, maybe it was that friend of a friend at a party who somehow made you feel like the only person in the room. They laughed at your jokes, the real laughs, not the polite ones. They agreed with your hot takes. They looked at you with this intensity, like you were a rare manuscript they couldn't wait to read. They mirrored your energy perfectly. It felt electric. It felt like fate. It felt like you'd known them forever. Now ask yourself the hard question: was that connection real? Or were you just witnessing a masterclass in burglary? Because here's the brutal truth we don't want to admit. We don't fall for people. We fall for the feeling of being understood. And if someone is really good at faking understanding, we will hand them the keys to our entire emotional kingdom without a second thought. We're talking about the Dark Triad. No, it's not a rejected title for a grim Batman sequel. It's a psychological cocktail of 3 distinct traits: narcissism, grandiose entitlement, Machiavellianism, cunning manipulation, and psychopathy, a lack of remorse or empathy. But forget the textbook. Here's what the Dark Triad actually is. It's software that runs on human hardware. It's a social operating system designed to win, not to connect. And the scariest part? The first download usually feels amazing, the casino of charm. Imagine you're walking through life with a slot machine inside your chest. Most people you meet, you pull the lever, and you get cherries. Maybe you get a lemon. It's fine. It's normal social interaction. It's mildly entertaining. Then you meet them. You pull the lever and suddenly the machine explodes. Bells are ringing. Lights are flashing. Coins are pouring out onto the floor. Jackpot, that's love bombing. That's the opening move. They don't just like you. They love you. They don't just agree with you. They understand your soul. They see depths in you that no one else has the vision to see. You've been eating plain toast your whole life, and suddenly someone is feeding you cotton candy and telling you it's a balanced breakfast. It feels addictive because it is addictive. Your brain is flooding with dopamine, the reward chemical. Your validation centers are lighting up like a Christmas tree. You think, finally, someone who gets it. Real talk. What's actually happening is that a predator has just identified you as high-value prey. They're not admiring your soul. They're taking inventory of your assets, your empathy, asset, your resources, asset, your willingness to see the best in people, jackpot, the 3-headed dog. You don't get the full Dark Triad experience with just one flavor. It's a combo platter, and you have to try all 3 to understand why the meal is so toxic. Level 1. The narcissist, the mirror with legs. The narcissist isn't in love with you. They are in love with the reflection of themselves. They see in your eyes when you look at them adoringly. You are a human mirror. As long as you reflect back perfection, power, and brilliance, life is great. The moment you show a crack in the mirror, a criticism, a need of your own, a boundary, you become defective merchandise. They don't get sad, they get angry. How dare the mirror malfunction? Level 2, the Machiavellian, the chess player. This one views life as a giant board game and you are a pawn. They are the strategist. They're not necessarily driven by the raw ego of the narcissist. They're driven by the win. They will gather information about you like a spy. They will remember the tiny detail about your difficult mother and use it later to either bond with you or to twist the knife, depending on what the game requires. They are patient. They are calculating. They play the long game. Level 3. The psychopath, the vacant lot. This is the engine. This is what makes the other two truly dangerous. The psychopath isn't necessarily the hockey mask-wearing maniac of movies. They are often the calmest person in the room. Why? Because they feel no emotional static. They don't have anxiety, guilt, or empathy scrambling their signal. Imagine walking through a library. You feel the quiet, the history, the weight of the books. A psychopath walks through the same library and sees potential kindling. They see objects. Other people are just furniture with pulse. This emotional emptiness allows them to take risks, say cruel things without flinching, and discard people like used napkin. When you mix these three, you get a person who believes they are superior narcissism, has a detailed plan to use you Machiavellianism, and feels zero guilt when they throw you away. Psychopathy, the rental agreement. That initial charm, that's the security deposit. It makes you think you're moving into a luxury penthouse. The reality is you're signing a lease on a studio apartment with no heat. Once the lease is signed, the maintenance stops. The texts that used to come every hour now come every other day. The compliments are replaced with subtle jabs. The undivided attention is now divided between you and their phone, or you and that crazy ex they warned you about. And you start working harder. You start trying to earn back that initial jackpot feeling. You think, if I can just be funnier, smarter, more supportive, they'll go back to being that amazing person I met. Here's the cold, hard math of the situation. You can't earn back something that was never real. That amazing person at the beginning wasn't the real them. The real them is the one sitting across from you now, looking bored while you pour your heart out. The initial connection was a product demo. It was a free sample designed to get you hooked so you'd buy the whole poisonous product. You're not remembering a person. You're remembering a feeling they manufactured. So that smile you fell for, the one that felt like sunshine, it was a perfect imitation. A wax figure in the museum of your memory. It looked real. It felt real. But if you got close enough, you'd realize there was no warmth coming off it. Just the cold, still air of a gallery. And that's the hidden truth. Charm without empathy isn't a gift, it's a weapon. And right now, you're still admiring how shiny it is, while they're figuring out where to aim it next. But charm is only the beginning. Chapter 2. Narcissism, the bottomless mirror. Remember that first conversation? You talked for hours. They hung on your every word. They asked questions that made you feel like a philosopher and artist, a genius finally getting the recognition you deserve. You thought, finally, someone who sees me. Here's the part they don't tell you in the movies. The narcissist isn't looking at you. They're looking at their own reflection in your eyes. You are not a person to them, you are a mirror. And as long as that mirror reflects back perfection, brilliance, and desirability, you are the best thing that ever happened to them. The moment the mirror gets a smudge, a criticism, a boundary, a bad day, you become defective. And defective merchandise gets returned, the supply chain. Let's talk about what actually fuels these people. It's not money, power, or sex, though they'll take all three. It's something psychologists call narcissistic supply. Think of it as emotional oxygen. But here's the twist, they can't produce it themselves. They're like a vampire who forgot how to grow their own food. They have to siphon it from you. Narcissistic supply comes in two flavors: positive supply, admiration, praise, envy from others, being seen with you because you're attractive, successful, or make them look good. You're a human Instagram filter. Negative supply, jealousy, drama, making you cry, making you beg for their attention back. Here's the sick part. Negative supply still counts as supply. To a narcissist, your tears are just as nourishing as your applause. Both prove they exist. Both prove they matter. Real talk. You know how your phone dies at 3% and you scramble for a charger? That's the narcissist every morning. And you're the wall outlet. They will plug into anything that sparks. The dinner party demo. Let's watch this thing in the wild. You're at a dinner party with your new partner, the charming one who swept you off your feet. You're telling a story about your trip to Costa Rica. You're mid-sentence, hitting the funny part about the monkey stealing your sandwich. Suddenly, your partner interrupts. "Oh, that reminds me of my trip to Thailand," they say. "I was scuba diving and saw this reef that no one is allowed to see anymore. The ambassador personally escorted me. The table turns, eyes shift. You're holding your monkey story like a deflated balloon. What just happened? You had the spotlight. You were getting supply that rightfully belonged to them. The mirror was reflecting you, and that is unacceptable. They need to recenter the mirror. They need to be the sun that all planets orbit. This isn't rudeness, it's a survival instinct." The narcissist prayer. There's a famous poem that floats around the internet. It's funny because it's painfully accurate. It goes like this: "That didn't happen. And if it did, it wasn't that bad. And if it was, it's not a big deal. And if it is, it's not my fault. And if it was, I didn't mean it. And if I did, you deserved it." That's not a joke. That's the operating manual. You try to tell them they hurt you. You explain that the interruption stung, that the public dismissal felt humiliating. You're looking for acknowledgement, for empathy, for a simple "I'm sorry, I didn't realize." What you get is a blank stare followed by a counterattack. You're too sensitive. You're always making everything about you. After everything I've done for you, this is what you focus on. Watch how the gears turn. They're not trying to understand you. They're trying to shut down the threat. Your pain is a mirror smudge. They're wiping it off as fast as possible so they can get back to admiring themselves. The silent treatment, psychological waterboarding, and when wiping doesn't work. When you keep insisting the mirror is cracked, they walk away, not dramatically, not with a slam, just absence. You send a text, nothing. You call, straight to voicemail. You show up at home, and they're watching TV like your furniture. This is the silent treatment, and it's not about needing space. It's a targeted strike. Think of it as psychological radio silence. You're tuned to their frequency 24/7, waiting for a signal, and they know it. So they broadcast nothing, just static, and you sit there twisting the dial, wondering what you did wrong, getting more desperate by the hour. The message is clear: you are not worth my words, you are not worth my time, you are nothing. And here's the trap. After 2 days of silence, when they finally text you at 2 a.m. with "Hey," you feel relief. You feel grateful. You're so starved for contact that you ignore the fact they just tortured you for 48 hours. You respond. The mirror is polished again, supply restored. The hidden truth. A narcissist doesn't fear failure. Failure can be blamed on someone else. What they truly fear is invisibility, being ignored, being irrelevant. If no one is looking at them, do they even exist? That's why they'll burn the house down just to feel the heat. That's why they'll create chaos if calm isn't giving them attention. Negative attention is still attention. Being hated is still being seen. The mirror cracks, so where does that leave you? You're standing there holding a rag, trying to polish away the smudges. You're working harder. You're being more understanding. You're shrinking yourself so you take up less reflective space. You're walking on eggshells so you don't accidentally crack the glass. And one day you catch your reflection in a different mirror. A friend's eyes, a family member's concern, a therapist's office, and you realize you've disappeared. You're not a person anymore. You're a function, a utility, a charger they plug into when the battery runs low. The worst part, they never lied about who they were. They showed you on day one. I need you to make me feel alive. You just thought that was passion. You thought that was love. It wasn't. It was a transaction. You were providing the admiration. They were providing the illusion of connection. And now the invoice is due. But here's what they don't want you to know. When the admiration stops flowing, when you finally pull the plug and walk away, that's when the real show begins. Because a narcissist without supply doesn't just fade away. They strategize, and that strategy, that's where the second member of the Dark Triad steps into the light. Chapter 3. Machiavellian Minds. The art of quiet control. Remember that argument you had last week? The one where you started with a legitimate complaint. Something they did that actually hurt you. And somehow ended the conversation apologizing for being too sensitive and promising to communicate better. Yeah, let's talk about that. You didn't lose that argument because you were wrong. You lost because you were playing checkers while they were playing three-dimensional chess. You were fighting for understanding. They were fighting for control. And those are two completely different games with completely different rule books. The human chess player. Meet the second member of the Dark Triad, the Machiavellian. Named after Niccolò Machiavelli, the 16th century political philosopher who wrote The Prince. Basically a how-to guide for being a terrible person while looking like a genius. The book was so brutally honest about manipulation that Machiavellian became shorthand for that person who smiles while stealing your wallet. But here's what makes them different from the narcissist. The narcissist needs attention like a plant needs sunlight. They're emotional, reactive. They'll burn the house down just to feel the warmth. The Machiavellian? They're the one who sold you the matches, convinced your neighbor to light them, and is now renting a U-Haul to buy your furniture at the foreclosure sale. They don't need attention. They need outcomes. Real talk. If the narcissist is a bull in a china shop, the Machiavellian owns the china shop, insured the bull, and is already filing the claim before the first plate hits the floor. Move 1, the information interview. Watch how they operate in the wild. You're at coffee, casual conversation. They ask about your job, your family, your ex, your dreams, your fears. They nod sympathetically. They share just enough about themselves to make you feel safe. A carefully curated highlight reel designed to make you open up. You think you're bonding. What you're actually doing is filling out a psychological application form. They're taking mental notes. She mentioned her father was distant, possible approval-seeking behavior. He got emotional talking about his last breakup. Sensitive to abandonment. Noted. They laughed at that dark joke. Comfortable with cynicism. Useful. By the time your coffee goes cold, they know more about your emotional architecture than your therapist does after 6 months. And you know their favorite color, that they like hiking? They don't actually like hiking. They just know it makes them seem balanced. The metaphor, you're handing them the keys to your house because they asked about your garden. You don't realize they're also mapping the floor plan, noting which windows don't lock, and checking when you go on vacation. Move 2, strategic patience. Here's where the Machiavellian separates from the amateur manipulator. Amateurs want results now. They push, they pressure, they get caught. The Machiavellian plays the long game like it's the only game. Let's say they want something from you, a promotion you're both up for, access to your social circle, your partner. Doesn't matter what. What matters is the timeline. They won't ask today. They won't ask next week. They'll spend 3 months becoming your work bestie. They'll bring you coffee on Mondays, remember your kid's birthday, defend you in meetings when you're not there. You'll tell your spouse, I don't know what I'd do without Sarah. She's the only real friend I have at that place. And Sarah will smile, because Sarah is building a bridge, and bridges are useful for 2 things, helping you cross rivers and helping armies invade. When she finally makes her move, when she subtly undermines you in front of the boss, when she accidentally shares that thing you told her in confidence, you won't see it coming. You'll blame yourself. You'll think, there must be a misunderstanding. Sarah is my friend. The implication, patience isn't a virtue for them. It's a weapon. They're willing to wait months, sometimes years, for the right moment to strike. They don't get bored. They don't get impulsive. They get results. Move 3, the engineered conversation. Let's zoom in on the micro skills. Because this is where it gets creepy. The Machiavellian doesn't just control what happens. They control how you think about what happens. Remember that fight where you ended up apologizing? Let's replay it with the sound on. You. Hey, it hurt my feelings when you did that thing. Machiavellian. Pauses. Looks down, takes a breath, I hear you. And I'm really sorry you feel that way. You feel relief, they apologized. Progress, but wait, listen closer. I'm sorry you feel that way, that's not an apology. That's a verbal judo move. They've just acknowledged your feelings, makes them seem reasonable, accepted 0 responsibility. The feeling is the problem, not their action. Positioned you as the emotional one. You're feeling, they're reasoning. If you push further, they escalate. I've been really stressed lately. My mom's health isn't great. I thought you of all people would understand. Boom. Now you're the bad guy for attacking someone with a sick mom. Never mind that you didn't know about the mom, never mind that it might not even be true. The information has been deployed. The guilt has been planted. And if you still push, if you still insist on being heard, I can see this conversation isn't productive. Maybe we should talk when you've calmed down. Translation, you're irrational. I'm logical. This is your fault. They leave. You're standing there holding your original complaint like a sandwich you wanted to share, but they've convinced you that you're the one who isn't hungry. The hidden truth. Conversations aren't conversations to them. They're operations. Every word is chosen. Every pause is time. Every emotional display. The frustration, the hurt, the vulnerability is a prop in a play where you don't even know you're in the audience. The empty filing cabinet. Here's what makes all of this possible: emotional detachment. The Machiavellian doesn't manipulate because they're angry. They don't lie because they're scared. They don't exploit because they're desperate. They do it because it works. They view emotions the way a contractor views lumber, as building materials. Your joy, useful for bonding. Your fear, useful for control. Your guilt, extremely useful for getting you to do things you don't want to do. They feel just enough to fake it convincingly. They can cry on cue. They can rage on demand. They can love you with such intensity that you'd swear it was real. But inside is a quiet room with a whiteboard and a strategy. And the scariest part? They don't hate you. They don't wish you ill. They simply don't care enough about you to wish anything at all. You're a variable in an equation, a means to an end, a piece on the board when the game ends. So what happens when you finally figure it out? When you catch them in the lie? When you refuse to play? Here's the part that will break your brain. They don't get angry. The narcissist would rage. The Machiavellian? They shrug, they move on. You're no longer a useful piece, so you're no longer worth the energy. And that cold clinical disengagement? That oh well, on to the next energy. It hurts more than any insult ever could, because it confirms what you suspected but couldn't admit. You were never a person to them. You were a project, and projects get abandoned when they stop working. But here's the thing about the Dark Triad. We've covered the one who needs attention and the one who needs control. There's one more, and this one doesn't need anything, doesn't want anything, doesn't feel anything. They just are, and they're the most dangerous of all. Chapter 4. Psychopathy. The absence of guilt. Remember that moment, the one where you confronted them. The evidence was right there. The text message, the credit card charge, the working late that turned into, where were you really? You had them, cornered, no escape, and they just looked at you. Not guilty, not scared, not even angry, just empty. Like you'd handed them a parking ticket instead of proof they'd demolished your entire emotional foundation. You waited for the tears, the apology, the explanation, anything. Instead, you got a slight head tilt, a calm okay, and then they went back to scrolling their phone. What the actual hell was that? That was psychopathy. And no, it's not what the movies sold you, the emotional colorblindness. Forget the hockey masks, forget the creepy laugh and the, I'll get you my pretty. That's cartoon villainy. That's Halloween costume psychopathy. Real psychopathy is much simpler and much more terrifying. It's emotional colorblindness. You see red anger, blue sadness, yellow joy. They see gray all the time. Imagine waking up tomorrow and discovering that everyone else can see colors you can't. They talk about the beautiful sunset, the oranges and purples. You see the sun leaving. They talk about the pain of losing someone, the grief that doubles you over. You see a person no longer standing in front of you. Inconvenient, maybe, but painful. What does pain feel like again? That's the internal experience of a psychopath. They know emotions exist. They've studied them the way a marine biologist studies dolphins. Fascinating creatures, completely alien, useful for certain experiments. They can mimic emotions. They can trigger emotions in you. They just can't feel them themselves. Real talk, a psychopath doesn't hate you. Hate requires caring. They don't love you. Love requires attachment. They don't feel guilty about hurting you. Guilt requires a conscience. They simply process you like weather, like furniture, like background noise. The two flavors of empathy. Now, before you start eyeing your coworkers suspiciously, let's break down what psychopathy actually looks like in the wild, because it comes in two distinct varieties. Version 1, the chaotic psychopath. This is the movie version. The one who can't hold a job, can't stay out of prison, can't stop themselves from burning every bridge. They're impulsive, reactive. They want something, they take it. They feel bored. They start a fire, literal or metaphorical. They leave a trail of wreckage that's easy to spot because they're not subtle. These folks usually end up in the system. They're the cautionary tales. The "I knew something was wrong with him" stories on the evening news. Version 2, the calm psychopath. This is the one you need to worry about. This is your CEO, your charismatic politician, the surgeon with steady hands, the negotiator who never blinks, the person who stays completely calm while everyone else is panicking. They're not impulsive, they're calculated. They don't feel fear, so they take risks that would paralyze normal people. They don't feel anxiety, so they sleep perfectly before the biggest presentation of their lives. They don't feel empathy, so they can fire you, ruin you, replace you, and go out for a steak dinner without a second thought. The metaphor, the chaotic psychopath, is a grenade. You see it coming. You hear the pin pull. The calm psychopath is a neurotoxin. Colorless, odorless, and by the time you realize something's wrong, you're already on the floor. The job interview test. Let's watch the calm psychopath in action. You're interviewing for a job, two candidates. First one is qualified, nervous, sweats a little, laughs too loud at your joke. Human, relatable. You see yourself in them. Second one walks in like they own the building. Composed, polished, answers every question without hesitation. Doesn't fidget, doesn't stumble. When you ask about their biggest failure, they don't get flustered. They deliver a perfectly rehearsed story about learning and growing that somehow makes them look even better. Who do you hire? Probably the second one, because they seem confident, they seem capable, they seem unshakable. What you don't realize is that they're not confident. Confidence requires the possibility of failure. They're not capable in the way you think. They've just gotten very good at appearing capable. And they're not unshakable because of inner strength. They're unshakable because nothing actually shakes them. There's nothing to shake. The implication: we're evolutionarily programmed to respect calmness. In tribal times, the calm one in a crisis was the one who got everyone out alive. We still have that wiring. So when we meet someone completely composed, we instinctively think, leader, protector, safe. With a psychopath, that instinct is catastrophically wrong. The blank stare. Remember that moment from the beginning? Because it's the closest you'll ever get to understanding what you're dealing with. You're pouring your heart out. Years of betrayal, months of lies, days of suspicion confirmed. Your voice is cracking, your hands are shaking. You're giving them the chance to make it right, to finally be honest, to finally show they care. And they look at you. Not with defiance, not with guilt, not with sadness. Just looking, like you're a television program they've lost interest in. Like you're explaining the plot of a dream you had. Like you're speaking a language they don't understand but are too polite to interrupt. That's not a defense mechanism. That's not them blocking you out because they can't handle the truth. That's them genuinely not understanding what the big deal is. You're upset, they get that. You're making sounds, they hear those. But the why, the emotional logic connecting "I did this thing" to "you should feel bad" to "you should apologize" to "we might heal," that entire chain is missing. It's like explaining color to someone who's only ever seen in grayscale. You can describe it forever. They'll nod along. They'll never see it, the hidden truth. Psychopaths don't lack emotions entirely. They have the approach emotions: anger, frustration, excitement, lust, satisfaction, the ones that help them get what they want. What they lack are the connecting emotions: love, guilt, empathy, remorse, attachment, the ones that make us human, the ones that make us care what happens to you after we get what we want. Why it feels like falling. Here's what makes this so devastating for the person on the other side. When someone hurts you, your brain assumes they either didn't know it would hurt you, ignorance, knew but couldn't help themselves, weakness, knew and did it anyway because they're angry, temporary, malice. All three options leave room for something: education, forgiveness, reconciliation, understanding. There's a path back. With a psychopath, there's no path. They knew. They could have helped it. They weren't angry, they just didn't care. Your pain wasn't a factor in their calculation. It wasn't even on the spreadsheet, and that realization that you were never really a person to them feeling. It's not just sad, it's existentially disturbing. It makes you question every interaction, every I love you, every inside joke, every moment you thought was connection. Was any of it real? No, it wasn't. It was performance. Skilled, convincing, Oscar-worthy performance. But behind the curtain, no wizard. Just a person pulling levers, pushing buttons, and wondering why you keep making those interesting sounds. The scary part. Now, here's where we need to have an uncomfortable conversation. Psychopathy is a spectrum. We all know someone who's a little cold, a little manipulative, a little too calm in a crisis. That doesn't make them a psychopath. But here's what the research actually shows. About 1% of the general population meets the clinical criteria for psychopathy. In corporate leadership, that number jumps to 3–4%. In certain high-stakes professions, law, finance, politics, it's higher still. Translation: you've almost certainly worked for one. You might have dated one. You might be related to one. And they're not all in prison. Most of them are just out there, moving through society, getting promotions, having families, running companies, making decisions that affect thousands of people, and feeling absolutely nothing about any of it. Not angry, not happy, not guilty, just processing, calculating, moving pieces on a board where other people are the pieces, the scariest part. But what if you could combine all three? What if someone had the narcissist's hunger for admiration, the Machiavellian strategic patience, and the psychopath's complete lack of remorse? What would that person look like? They wouldn't just want your attention. They'd plan how to get it. They wouldn't just manipulate you. They'd enjoy the game. They wouldn't just hurt you. They'd watch you bleed with genuine curiosity about how long it takes you to stop moving. And they'd be the most charming person you ever met. That person exists. That person is the full Dark Triad. And now that you know the ingredients, it's time to see how they mix together. Chapter 5. When the traits combine, the narcissist gets caught. They get too loud, too obvious, too hungry for attention. They eventually find someone who doesn't care how special they are. And the whole thing collapses like a cake in a rainstorm. The Machiavellian gets outsmarted. Eventually, someone sees the strings. Someone notices the patterns. The chess player meets a better chess player, and the game ends. The psychopath gets bored. They move on. Always, because without connection, without attachment, without any reason to stay, every road leads to the next exit. They're not running from anything. They're just running. But what happens when you combine all three? What happens when the hunger for admiration meets the strategic patience of a grandmaster, meets the complete absence of guilt? You get something that doesn't get caught, doesn't get outsmarted, doesn't get bored. You get the full Dark Triad. And it's not a person anymore. It's a force of nature wearing a human suit. The toxic smoothie. Think of the Dark Triad traits as ingredients. Narcissism is the sugar. It's what makes the whole thing appealing. It's the charisma, the confidence, the I'm special and so are you energy that draws you in. Without it, the blend would be cold and obviously dangerous. With it, you can't stop tasting. Machiavellianism is the structure. It's the recipe, the time. The knowledge that you add the sugar after the base, not before. It's the patience to wait, the intelligence to plan, the self-control to not ruin everything by moving too soon. Psychopathy is the absence of spoilage. Normal people have emotional expiration dates. Guilt kicks in, empathy interrupts. Remorse ruins the fun. The psychopathy component removes all that. This smoothie never goes bad. It can sit on the counter for years, waiting, planning, watching. And when you finally take a sip, it tastes exactly as sweet as it did on day one. Real talk. You know how they say too many cooks spoil the broth? This is the opposite. These three cooks work together perfectly because they're all cooking different things. One handles the charm. One handles the strategy. One handles the cleanup, and you're the dinner, the hybrid advantage. Let's watch how this plays out in real life. Meet David. David is your new boss. He's charismatic as hell. First week, he remembers everyone's name, everyone's kid's name, everyone's dog's name. He tells stories that make you laugh. He asks questions that make you feel heard. He has this way of looking at you that says, you matter, you specifically. Out of everyone here, you. That's the narcissism, the mirror, the reflection of your own worthiness bounced back at you until you're dizzy with it. Week 2, David starts making changes, small ones, reorganizing the supply closet, shifting meeting times. Nothing major, but you notice he always seems to be in the right place at the right time. He's always chatting with the right people. He knows things he shouldn't know. About the company, about the competition, about you. That's the Machiavellianism, the chess game, the quiet collection of information that will become ammunition when needed. Week 3, someone gets fired. Sarah, she'd been there 12 years, solid worker, well-liked. But she questioned one of David's decisions in a meeting, nothing dramatic. Just a simple, "Hey, have we considered the other option?" David fired her that afternoon. Calmly, professionally, with a severance package and a reference letter that technically said nothing bad but somehow guaranteed she'd never work in the industry again. And then he went to lunch, ate a sandwich, scrolled his phone, came back and asked you how your weekend was. No tension, no guilt, no did I do the right thing pause. Just onward. That's the psychopathy, the emotional flatline, the ability to end someone's career and digest turkey on rye without a single flutter of humanity. The metaphor, David isn't 3 different people. He's one person with 3 superpowers. The charm opens doors. The strategy navigates the rooms. The emptiness lets him walk through fire without burning. And you're standing there thinking, what a great boss. While he's already planning which door you'll be pushed out of when your usefulness expires. The social chameleon. Here's what makes the full Dark Triad so hard to spot. They're whatever you need them to be. Need a leader. Here's confidence, vision, and the ability to make hard decisions without flinching. Need a partner? Here's attention, passion, and the feeling that you've finally found someone who gets you. Need a friend? Here's loyalty, humor, and the sense that you two against the world. They're not being fake in the way an actor is fake, performing one role, then dropping it when the curtain falls. They're more like water. They take the shape of whatever container they're in. And they do it so seamlessly that you never think to ask, what's the shape when there's no container? The implication, you're not falling for them. You're falling for the version of them that you need, and they know that. They studied that. They built that version specifically for you. The way a locksmith cuts a key for a specific lock, why they win. Let's talk about why the full Dark Triad isn't just dangerous but successful. In small doses, each trait is actually useful in modern society. A little narcissism helps you ask for the raise, demand the respect, take the stage. A little Machiavellianism helps you navigate office politics, build alliances, think strategically. A little psychopathy helps you make the hard decision, fire the underperformer, stay calm in the crisis. Most of us have traces of all 3. It's part of being human in a competitive world. The difference is balance. Most of us have guilt that checks our narcissism, empathy that checks our strategy, connection that checks our coldness. The full Dark Triad has no checks, no brakes, no internal speed limit. They can go as far, as fast, as hard as they want, and they do. The hidden truth. We've built a world that rewards these traits. Corporate culture rewards the charming strategist who can make tough calls. Dating culture rewards the confident pursuer who seems to have no fears. Media culture rewards the bold, the unapologetic, the doesn't care what anyone thinks archetype. We've created a society where the full Dark Triad doesn't just survive, it thrives, the human mirror maze. So what does it feel like to be in a relationship with one? Imagine walking through a house of mirrors. Every surface shows you a version of yourself. Confident you, desirable you, brilliant you, worthy you. You walk deeper and deeper, chasing these reflections, feeling seen in ways you've never felt seen. Then the lights go out. You're alone in the dark with all these mirrors, and you realize there was never anyone else in here, just you and your own reflection, repeated endlessly. The person you thought was with you, just another mirror, showing you what you wanted to see until you got lost enough that escape became impossible. That's the full Dark Triad experience. You spend months, years, decades chasing the version of yourself they showed you, and one day you realize they were never there, just you, alone, surrounded by broken glass. The scary part. Here's what keeps psychologists up at night. These people aren't rare. We like to think they are. We like to believe that someone capable of this level of manipulation, this absence of humanity, must be a 1 in a million anomaly, a monster, a freak of nature. The research says different. Depending on which study you read, somewhere between 1% and 4% of the general population meets the criteria for clinically significant psychopathy. Add in the narcissists and Machiavellians who don't cross the clinical threshold but still operate the same way, and the numbers climb higher. Walk through a crowded mall. That's thousands of people. Do the math. They're not all in prison. They're not all in treatment. They're not all obvious. They're just out there, running companies, leading governments, teaching your kids, dating your friends, sitting next to you in meetings. And most of them will never get caught because they're not making the obvious mistakes. They're not the chaotic version you can spot from across the room. They're the calm ones, the successful ones, the ones everyone admires, until they're not, until you're on the other side of one of their decisions, wondering how you ended up here, how you ended up nothing to someone who once made you feel like everything. The question you can't answer. So how do you spot one? How do you tell the difference between genuine charm and narcissistic performance? Between strategic thinking and Machiavellian manipulation? Between healthy calm and psychopathic emptiness? You can't. Not always. Not at first. Not when they're good. But you can pay attention to the gaps. The moments where the mask slips. The times when you feel confused. Not because they're complicated, but because something doesn't add up. The small, quiet voice that says, wait, that didn't feel right. That voice? It's not paranoid. It's not jealous. It's not too sensitive. It's your brain noticing that the math doesn't work, that the emotions don't match the situation, that the person in front of you is showing you a reflection, not a face. And the next chapter? That's about what happens when you finally stop looking at the reflection and start looking at them. Chapter 6. Love, Sex, and Psychological Domination. Let me ask you something uncomfortable. Was it the best sex of your life? Be honest. The kind that made you feel like every other time was just practice. The kind where they looked at you like you were the only person who'd ever existed. And you thought, finally, this is what everyone's been talking about. And then, weeks or months later, you found yourself crying in a bathroom, or staring at your phone at 3 a.m., or apologizing for something you still don't fully understand. Wondering how the person who made you feel so alive could also make you feel so dead. Here's the part nobody tells you about the Dark Triad. Intimacy isn't a connection for them. It's an operation. And you just got operated on. The Trojan horse of desire. Let's start with the physical, because that's where it usually begins. The Dark Triad individual doesn't approach sex the way you do. For you, sex is about connection, pleasure, vulnerability, trust. It's a bonding mechanism. It's the physical expression of something emotional. For them, sex is a delivery system. Think of it as the Trojan horse. You see this beautiful, impressive gift at your gates. It seems too good to be true. You open up, let it inside, and then, surprise! It's filled with soldiers who've been waiting to burn your city down. The sex is the gift. The domination is the army inside. They're not interested in the act itself. Not really. They're interested in what the act gives them access to. Your guard, your walls, your ability to say no. Once you've been physically vulnerable with someone, it's much harder to be emotionally protected. Once they've seen you naked, they've seen you naked. And that vulnerability is exactly what they're after. The metaphor. Normal people have sex to get close. Dark Triad people have sex to get in. There's a difference the size of the Grand Canyon, and you only realize it when you're standing at the bottom looking up. Level 1, the physical con. Let's break down how this actually works in the bedroom. Phase 1, the mirror, they study you. Not in a creepy I'm watching you sleep way, in a I'm paying attention to what you like way. They note every sound, every movement, every reaction. They're building a map of your pleasure. Not because your pleasure matters to them, but because your pleasure is a lever. When they pull that lever correctly, you feel seen. You feel understood. You think, they just get me. What's actually happening? They're taking notes for future reference. Every button they find is a button they can push later, for reward or for punishment. Phase 2, the performance. Now they deliver. And they deliver hard. The Dark Triad individual is often an incredible lover. Not because they're naturally gifted, but because they're intensely focused on the outcome. They're performing, and like any good performer, they've studied the audience. They'll do things your ex never did. They'll go down on you for hours. They'll try things you've only fantasized about. They'll make you feel like a sexual goddess god simply because they're giving you the attention you've always wanted. You think, this is what I've been missing. The truth, you're watching a Broadway show. It's spectacular. It's moving. It's also completely scripted and will close after its run. Phase 3, the hook. Afterward, they're present, they hold you, they talk. They share vulnerable things. Carefully chosen stories designed to make you feel trusted. They might even cry. Yes, they can cry on command. It's a skill like juggling. You leave that bed thinking you found your person, your soulmate, the one who finally sees all of you and wants all of you. You've actually just signed a contract you didn't read. And the fine print is brutal. Real talk. Ever notice how the best sex you ever had often came with the worst emotional aftermath? That's not a coincidence. That's by design. The intensity is the trap. If it felt just pretty good, you wouldn't be hooked. It has to feel transcendent, so you'll ignore the red flags doing a conga line through your peripheral vision. Level 2, the intimacy con. Once they've got you physically hooked, they move to the emotional game. This is where things get really interesting and really painful. The vulnerability trap. They share things, deep things, childhood wounds, past betrayals, fears and insecurities. They make themselves seem raw and real and broken in ways that make you want to save them. You think, they trust me, they're opening up. This is real. Here's what's actually happening. They're giving you a script. They're telling you exactly which wounds to avoid stepping on, which triggers to accommodate, which soft spots to protect. They're handing you a map of their vulnerability so you'll navigate around it carefully. And then, when they inevitably hurt you, they'll point to those vulnerabilities as excuses. I only acted that way because of my ex. You know I have trust issues. I'm just scared of getting hurt again. Suddenly, you're the one managing their feelings about their behavior. The tables have turned so smoothly you didn't even feel them rotate. The metaphor, they've performed an emotional striptease. Piece by piece, they've revealed just enough to keep you watching. But unlike a real striptease, there's no actual naked person at the end. Just more layers. Always more layers. And you're so invested in seeing the real them that you keep watching long after you should have walked out. Level 3, the control grid. Now let's talk about how sex and intimacy become the control grid, the invisible fence that keeps you contained, the reward schedule. Remember how amazing it was at first? That wasn't just passion. That was a variable reward schedule straight out of B.F. Skinner's playbook. Skinner put pigeons in boxes and gave them food pellets at random intervals. The pigeons went crazy. They pecked frantically, compulsively, unable to stop because they never knew when the next pellet would come. That's you. That's what they've done to you. Sometimes they're incredible, attentive, passionate, present. Sometimes they're cold, distant, cruel. You never know which version you're going to get. So you keep showing up, keep trying, keep hoping for the good version. You're pecking the lever, desperate for the next pellet, the withdrawal punishment. And when they really want to hurt you, when you've stepped out of line, or failed to provide enough supply, they withdraw, not just emotionally, physically. They stop touching you, stop wanting you, stop looking at you like you're desirable. They make you feel invisible, undesirable, wrong. And because they've conditioned you to need their approval, this withdrawal feels like dying. You'll do anything to get back in their good graces. You'll apologize for things you didn't do. You'll change who you are. You'll shrink and stretch and contort yourself into whatever shape they want. The hidden truth, they're not punishing you because they're angry. They're punishing you because it works. The silent treatment, the withheld affection, the sudden coldness, these aren't emotional responses. They're tactical strikes. They're showing you who's in control. The trap door. Here's where it gets really dark. By the time you realize what's happening, you're in too deep. You've invested too much. You've given too much. You've told them things you've never told anyone. You've been vulnerable in ways you can't take back, and they know it. They know you'll stay, because leaving means admitting it was all fake. It means accepting that the most intense connection of your life was a performance. It means grieving someone who never actually existed, so you stay, and you try harder. And you convince yourself that if you just love them enough, just give enough, just be enough, they'll go back to being the person they were at the beginning. The cruelest joke, that person never existed. You're trying to resurrect a ghost. You're trying to wake up a character who was played by an actor who's already left the building. The real question, so why do we fall for this? Why do we confuse intensity with intimacy? Why do we mistake performance for passion? Because we're hungry. That's the honest answer. We're walking around with these empty spaces inside us, spaces carved out by childhood, by past relationships, by a culture that tells us we're not enough. And when someone comes along who seems to fill those spaces completely, we don't ask questions, we just drink. The Dark Triad individual isn't a monster, they're a mirror. They reflect back exactly what we want to see. And we're so relieved to finally see it that we don't notice we're looking at ourselves. The hard truth, they didn't create the hunger, they just exploited it. They didn't make you needy. They just found the need and filled it with poison. The escape hatch. Here's the thing about traps, they only work if you stay in them. The moment you stop playing, stop pecking the lever, stop chasing the ghost, stop trying to earn love that was never real, the trap loses its power. They'll try to pull you back. Of course they will. You're supply, you're a resource. They don't want to lose you, they'll love bomb you again. They'll promise change, they'll become the person from the beginning just long enough to hook you again. But now you know. Now you know that intensity isn't intimacy. That performance isn't passion. That the best sex of your life can come from the worst person you'll ever meet. And now you have a choice. You can stay in the trap hoping this time will be different, or you can walk out, alone and hurting, and start the long, slow process of filling those empty spaces yourself. Chapter 7. Corporate Psychopaths. Have you ever watched someone get promoted and thought, what the actual hell just happened? The person who got the corner office, the one who threw their team under the bus during the presentation, the one who takes credit for everyone's work, and somehow makes it look like charity. You sit there clutching your performance review that says, needs to be more of a team player, while they're upstairs getting a bonus for exceptional leadership. Here's what's happening that nobody tells you. In business, empathy is often treated like a disability. And the people who lack it entirely, they're not just surviving, they're running the place. The boardroom hunting ground. Walk into any large organization and you'll find the same ecosystem. On the ground floor, you've got the workers. The people who actually do things. They care about quality, they care about their colleagues. They stay late to help, share credit, and genuinely want the company to succeed. On the middle floors, you've got the managers. Some good, some bad, most just trying to keep their heads above water. They're caught between caring about their teams and answering to the people above them. On the top floor, you've got the predators. Not all of them, of course. Plenty of ethical leaders exist, but enough. Enough that you've probably worked for one. Enough that the phrase corporate psychopath isn't an insult. It's a job description. Real talk. You know how they say nice guys finish last? In corporate America, nice guys finish laid off. The ones who finish first are often the ones who never lost sleep over who they stepped on to get there. The 3 Floors of Hell tour. Let's take a walk through the corporate building and see our Dark Triad friends in their natural habitat. Floor 1. The narcissist CEO. Meet Jennifer. She's brilliant. She'll tell you she's brilliant. She'll tell everyone she's brilliant. Constantly in meetings and emails and the leadership philosophy. She had HR laminate and hang in every conference room. Jennifer doesn't care about profits. She cares about her profits. She doesn't care about the company's reputation. She cares about her reputation. Every decision filters through one question. Does this make me look good? If the company succeeds, it's because of her vision. If it fails, it's because the market shifted, or the team didn't execute, or that one guy in accounting who she's been meaning to fire anyway. She surrounds herself with people who reflect well on her. Attractive people, impressive people, people who make her look even more successful by association, and she systematically removes anyone who might outshine her or, worse, tell her the truth. The metaphor, Jennifer isn't running a company. She's running a mirror factory. Every surface is designed to show her exactly what she wants to see, and woe to the person who brings a smudge. Floor 2. The Machiavellian middle manager. Meet Marcus. Marcus has been with the company for 8 years. He's never made a huge mistake. He's never had a huge success. He just persists, like a cockroach with a 401k. Marcus knows everything, not because he's brilliant, but because he's listening. He knows who's sleeping with whom. He knows whose kid is sick. He knows who's looking for other jobs and who's about to get fired. He collects information the way squirrels collect nuts, frantically, obsessively, and for use during the long winter. When a project succeeds, Marcus is somehow attached to it. When a project fails, Marcus is somehow nowhere near it. He builds alliances carefully, never committing fully to any side, always leaving himself an exit. He's been acting manager for 3 years. Because promoting him would require someone to notice, he's never actually done anything. But he's also impossible to fire, because he knows where all the bodies are buried, including some he buried himself. The metaphor. Marcus is playing chess while everyone else is playing. Who wants to be friends? He's already thinking 3 moves ahead, and you're still deciding which coffee mug to use. Floor 3, the psychopath executive. Meet Rebecca. Rebecca is calm. Always calm. When the quarterly numbers come in disastrously low, everyone panics. Rebecca orders a sandwich. When the merger falls through, everyone despairs. Rebecca asks what's next. When she fires 30 people in a single afternoon, she goes to yoga and sleeps like a baby. Rebecca doesn't get angry. She doesn't get sad. She doesn't get attached. She gets results. And results are all the board cares about. She can make the hard decisions because they're not hard for her. Laying off a single mother? Unfortunate, but the spreadsheet says it's necessary. Crushing a competitor's business? Aggressive, but the shareholders demand growth. Destroying a protege's career because they threatened her position? Strategic, nothing personal. And that's the terrifying part. It's never personal, because nothing is. People are variables, resources, line items. They're not people at all. The implication. Rebecca isn't evil in the mustache-twirling sense. She's just optimized. She's removed the inefficiency of emotion from her professional life. And in a system that rewards efficiency above all else, she's the perfect product, the promotion paradox. Here's where it gets really uncomfortable. These people don't just survive in corporate environments. They thrive. They get promoted. They get rewarded. They get celebrated. Why? Because the traits that make them dangerous in relationships make them valuable in business. Charm becomes leadership presence. Manipulation becomes strategic thinking. Lack of empathy becomes ability to make tough calls. Grandiosity becomes vision. Emotional detachment becomes grace under pressure. We've taken the same traits that destroy intimate relationships and rebranded them as executive qualities. We've created a system where the people who feel nothing rise to the top, and the people who feel everything burn out trying to keep up. The hidden truth. Corporate culture doesn't accidentally reward Dark Triad traits. It's designed to. We've built organizations that value short-term gains over long-term health, individual achievement over collective success, and results over humanity. The Dark Triad individual isn't a bug in this system. They're a feature, the layoff that launched a career. Let me tell you about Tom. Tom was a mid-level manager at a tech company, not particularly talented, not particularly liked, but Tom understood something that his colleagues didn't. Loyalty is a liability. When the company needed to cut costs, Tom volunteered to lead the restructuring. He identified the underperformers, which happened to include everyone who'd ever disagreed with him. He delivered the news personally, with just enough fake sympathy to avoid HR complaints. And when the dust settled, Tom had eliminated his rivals, reduced his headcount targets, and positioned himself as the guy who makes hard decisions. 6 months later, Tom got promoted to director. The people he fired? They're still looking for work, still processing the betrayal, still wondering how someone they covered for, stayed late for, actually could throw them away like trash. Tom doesn't wonder. Tom doesn't process. Tom got a bonus and a better parking spot. The metaphor. Tom is a corporate bonsai tree. He's been carefully shaped and pruned by a system that rewards exactly this kind of growth. Sideways, ruthless, and completely without roots. The empathy tax. Now let's talk about what this costs the rest of us. Every time a Dark Triad individual gets promoted over someone more qualified, but less strategic, we pay a tax. Every time a compassionate leader gets pushed out for being too soft, we pay a tax. Every time a company prioritizes short-term stock prices over long-term employee well-being, we pay a tax. But the tax isn't just financial, it's psychological. Working for a corporate psychopath changes you. It makes you cynical. It makes you guarded. It makes you question whether the way you want to work, collaboratively, honestly, humanly, is even possible. It makes you wonder if you need to become a little more like them just to survive. And some people do. Some people learn the lesson. Some people decide that if you can't beat them, you might as well join them. And then they become the next Tom, the next Rebecca, the next predator climbing over the bodies of the people they used to be. The cruel irony. The system perpetuates itself. The survivors become the selectors. The traumatized become the traumatizers. And the cycle continues. The one question: so how do you survive in an environment that rewards people who don't care about you? How do you keep your humanity when humanity is treated as a weakness? You start by understanding something fundamental. Their success is not your failure. The corporate psychopath gets the corner office. The Machiavellian gets the promotion. The narcissist gets the praise. But they don't get what you have. They don't get genuine connection. They don't get loyal colleagues who actually like them. They don't get to go home and feel full. They get empty rooms and bigger bonuses and the constant, exhausting work of maintaining a facade that has nothing behind it. Is that success? Maybe by some metrics, but not by the ones that matter at 3 a.m., when you're alone with your thoughts and wondering if anyone would show up if you stopped performing. The real question: do you want to win their game, or do you want to play a different one? Because here's the thing about the corporate world. It's not the only world. There are companies that value humanity. There are leaders who lead with empathy. There are workplaces where collaboration isn't a buzzword but a practice. They're harder to find. They pay less sometimes. They don't make headlines, but they also don't require you to sell your soul for a corner office. The warning: if you're in a workplace with a corporate psychopath, you'll know. Not immediately, they're too charming for that. But eventually, you'll notice that people who've been there longer have a certain flatness, a weariness, a wariness around certain topics or certain people. You'll notice that turnover is high in some departments but not others. You'll notice that credit flows up and blame flows down. You'll notice that the person everyone seems to admire is also the person no one actually trusts. And when you notice these things, pay attention, because your gut is telling you something your job description never will. You're not in a workplace. You're in a hunting ground. And the hunters are not done yet. Chapter 8. Gaslighting. The war on your memory. Have you ever had an argument that left you genuinely confused about what actually happened? Not the kind where you disagree about interpretation. The kind where you're both describing the same event, and their version is so different from yours that you start wondering if you're losing your mind. You never said that. I did. I texted you. You didn't. Look, here's my phone, no text. I definitely sent it. You must have deleted it. Why would I delete it? I don't know. Maybe you have something to hide. And suddenly you're not discussing the original issue anymore. You're defending your character. You're explaining why you're not the kind of person who deletes texts. You're apologizing for something you're pretty sure you didn't do, just to make the confusion stop. Welcome to gaslighting, the most sophisticated weapon in the Dark Triad arsenal. This isn't just lying. Lying is easy. Lying is amateur hour. Gaslighting is something else entirely. It's not about hiding the truth. It's about destroying your ability to trust your own mind, the reality edit. Let's back up and define this thing properly. Gaslighting is a systematic pattern of manipulation where the abuser causes the victim to doubt their own perception, memory, and sanity. The goal isn't to win an argument. The goal is to become the sole source of truth in your life. Think of it as reality editing. Normal relationships have disagreements. Two people see the same movie. One thinks it's great, one thinks it's garbage. That's fine. That's life. Gaslighting is when one person says, "The movie was never about aliens. It was always a period drama." You're remembering it wrong. You always misremember things. Your memory is terrible. In fact, I'm worried about you. Maybe you should see someone about that. And you sit there holding your memory of the alien invasion, suddenly wondering if maybe, could it be, was it all in your head? The metaphor, gaslighting, is like someone secretly moving your furniture an inch to the left every night. Not enough to be obvious, just enough that you keep stubbing your toe. Eventually, you stop trusting the layout of your own house. The origin story. The term comes from a 1938 play called Gaslight, later made into a movie starring Ingrid Bergman. In it, a husband slowly convinces his wife she's going insane. He dims the gas lights in their home. When she notices, he insists the lights aren't dimming, she's imagining it. He hides things and claims she lost them. He makes sounds and insists she's hearing things. By the end, she's questioning everything: her memory, her perception, her sanity, all because he systematically, patiently, relentlessly undermined her grip on reality. The play was fiction, the technique is not. Real talk. The fact that someone wrote a play about this in 1938 means we've known about this dynamic for almost a century. And yet here we are, still falling for it, still wondering why we feel crazy around certain people. We've had the instruction manual for 90 years. We just didn't want to believe anyone would actually use it. Stage 1, the seed of doubt. Gaslighting doesn't start big, it starts small. Microscopic. Week 1 of the relationship. You mentioned something they said yesterday. I never said that. Simple, clean, easy to dismiss. You probably misheard. No big deal. Week 2. You remember an agreement you both made. We never agreed to that. You must have misunderstood. Maybe you did. You've been stressed. It's possible. Week 3. You bring up a text exchange. You're misreading that. That's not what I meant at all. You always twist my words. Ouch, always? That stings, but maybe they're right. Maybe you do twist things. You don't mean to. But, week 4, you're crying. You don't know why you're crying. You just know that every conversation ends with you feeling wrong, confused, and vaguely guilty. You start second-guessing yourself before you even speak. You start checking facts obsessively. You start wondering if maybe you are the problem. The implication, the seed of doubt, doesn't need to be big. It just needs to be planted. Water it with repetition, fertilize it with emotion, and eventually it grows into a jungle you can't see through. Stage 2, the isolation campaign. Once your reality is shaky, the gaslighter moves to phase 2, cutting off alternative perspectives. They don't want you talking to friends. Friends will validate your version. Friends will say, that doesn't sound right. Friends are a threat to the reality monopoly. So they start small here too. I don't think your friends really support you. Did you hear what Sarah said last week? About your job? That was pretty harsh. They're not bad people. I just think they bring out a side of you that isn't your best. My therapist says it's important to build our own life. Just us against the world. You've changed since you started hanging out with them. Not in a good way. Each comment is just plausible enough to land. Sarah did make that joke about your job. Your friends can be a lot sometimes. And wouldn't it be romantic, just the two of you building something special? Before you know it, you're seeing less of your people. You're relying more on your partner. You're checking in before making plans. You're running every thought through their filter. The metaphor. They're not just moving your furniture. They're boarding up your windows. They're telling you the outside world is dangerous, that you don't need to see it, that everything you need is right here, inside with them. And you believe it because the alternative, being alone with your confusion, is terrifying. Stage 3, the identity attack. Now comes the really insidious part. Once your memory is compromised and your support system is gone, they go after who you are. You're so sensitive. That's always been your problem. You're paranoid. You think everyone's out to get you. You're dramatic. You turn nothing into something. You're crazy. Honestly, I'm worried about you. Notice what's happening here? They're not just saying you're wrong about an event. They're saying you're wrong about yourself. They're rewriting your identity. You used to be confident. Now you're arrogant. You used to be expressive. Now you're dramatic. You used to be perceptive. Now you're paranoid. You used to be feeling. Now you're too sensitive. Every quality you once valued in yourself gets reframed as a flaw. Every strength becomes a weakness. Every aspect of your personality becomes evidence that you're the problem. And the worst part, you start to believe it, the hidden truth. Gaslighting isn't ultimately about specific events. It's about identity erosion. It's about making you so uncertain of who you are that you'll accept any version of reality they provide. If you hear something enough times, it starts to feel true. That's not a character flaw. It's how human brains work. We process familiar information more easily, and we mistake that ease for truth. They say you're forgetful every day in 100 small ways. Eventually, you forget things and think, see, they were right. You forget that everyone forgets things. You forget that their constant suggestion created the very behavior they're criticizing. Emotion blocks logic. Gaslighting conversations are designed to be emotionally overwhelming. By the time you're crying, defending yourself, or begging for understanding, you're not thinking clearly, you're not fact-checking. You're just trying to make the pain stop. And in that state, you'll agree to anything. You'll admit to anything. You'll sign off on any version of reality that offers relief. Confusion creates dependency. The most brilliant part of gaslighting is that it makes you need them. When you can't trust your own mind, you need someone else's. And they're right there, ready to provide it, ready to tell you what's real, ready to help you understand. You become dependent on their version of reality. And dependency is the ultimate control. Real talk. It's like being lost in a forest with a broken compass. When someone comes along and says, I know the way, you follow them anywhere, even if they're leading you off a cliff, because anything is better than being lost alone. The toll. Let's talk about what this does to a human being. Chronic gaslighting doesn't just confuse you. It changes your brain. You develop hypervigilance, constantly scanning for threats, constantly checking your own perceptions. You lose confidence in decisions. What to eat, what to wear, what to think. You second-guess every memory, every feeling, every instinct. You start apologizing constantly for everything, for things you didn't do, for feelings you shouldn't have, for being who you are. You stop trusting people, because if you couldn't trust your own mind, how can you trust anyone else's? You isolate further, convinced that everyone is a potential threat. And deep down in the quiet moments, you start to believe what they've been telling you all along, that you're broken, that you're crazy, that this is all your fault. The cruelest joke, the very sensitivity that made you loving, perceptive, and emotionally intelligent, is the thing they exploited to destroy you. Your empathy became your entry point. Your ability to doubt yourself, which is normally a sign of healthy introspection, became the lever they used to pry open your mind, the test. So how do you know if you're being gaslit? Here's a simple test. Think about the last conflict you had with this person. Can you describe what happened clearly? Or does it get fuzzy? Do you remember the sequence of events? Or just the feelings, confusion, guilt, the desperate need to make it right? Ask yourself, when you leave conversations with them, do you feel clearer or more confused? More yourself or less yourself? More grounded or more lost? Talk to someone you trust. Describe what's happening. Don't soften it. Don't explain it away. Just say it out loud and watch their face. If their face says, that's not right, believe them. Because here's the thing about gaslighting, it only works in isolation. The moment you bring someone else into the room, someone with their own memory, their own perception, their own grip on reality, the spell breaks. The emperor has no clothes. The gaslights aren't dimming, and you were never crazy. You were just under attack, the paradox. But this raises a question that's been lurking beneath every chapter. Why do we fall for this? Why do empaths, sensitive, caring, emotionally intelligent people, keep ending up in relationships with people who feel nothing? Why does the target keep showing up? Why does the victim keep hoping? That's not an accident either. Chapter 9. Why You Were the Perfect Target. Let's have an uncomfortable conversation. You've been nodding along for 8 chapters, recognizing faces, flinching at memories, feeling that mix of validation and horror that comes from finally understanding what happened to you. But there's a question you haven't asked. A question that's been sitting in the back of your mind like a splinter you're afraid to pull out. Why me? Why did they choose you? What made you the one? Was there something wrong with you? Something broken? Something that painted a target on your back and invited the predators in? Here's the part nobody tells you. The part that will make you angry and relieved and maybe a little sick all at once. They didn't choose you because you're broken. They chose you because you're predictable. And your kindness? That beautiful, generous, empathetic heart you've always secretly been proud of. That wasn't your shield. That was your beacon, the empath operating system. Let's talk about how you're wired. You feel things deeply. Not just your own feelings, other people's too. You walk into a room and instantly know who's fighting, who's anxious, who's pretending to be okay. You absorb emotions like a sponge absorbs water. You carry them around with you, sometimes for days. You want to help. It's not a choice, it's a reflex. Someone's in pain and you move toward them. Someone's struggling and you offer support. Someone's hurting and you take it personally, like you failed them somehow. You believe in the good in people. Even when they show you otherwise, you look for explanations. Maybe they're having a bad day. Maybe they were raised badly. Maybe they just need someone to believe in them. You apologize. A lot. For things that aren't your fault. For boundaries you didn't mean to cross. For taking up space. For existing in a way that might inconvenience someone else. You give second chances and third chances. And chances you stopped counting. Because the number would be too embarrassing to admit. The metaphor, you're running on Empathy Operating System 1.0. It's beautiful software. It makes the world warmer, kinder, more connected. But it has one massive security flaw. It trusts all incoming data. And the Dark Triad. They're not users, they're viruses. And they're very, very good at finding unpatched systems. Level 1, the beacon. Here's what you need to understand about Dark Triad targeting. They're not wandering around stabbing randomly. They're observing. They're testing. They're running little experiments to see who responds. That vulnerable story they shared on the first date, that wasn't vulnerability. That was a probe. They watch how you react. Do you lean in? Do you offer comfort? Do you share something vulnerable in return? Do you try to fix it? If you do any of these things, you've just lit up like a Christmas tree. You've announced loud and clear. I am someone who responds to emotional cues. I am someone who tries to help. I am someone who will invest in your pain. Congratulations, you're on the list. Real talk. Think of yourself as a house in a dark forest. Most people walk by, see the lights and keep going. But some people, the ones with maps and crowbars and bad intentions, they're looking for houses that look occupied, lived in, warm, because warm houses have things worth taking. Your empathy isn't a weakness, but it is an advertisement. And not everyone who sees the ad is a customer. Some are burglars. Level 2, the study. Once you're on the list, the real work begins. They study you, not in a creepy hiding in the bushes way, in a highly attentive romantic partner way. They ask questions. They listen to answers. They remember everything. Your childhood wounds noted. Your insecurities about your body filed. Your fear of abandonment logged. Your desperate need to be understood cataloged. You think they're the most attentive person you've ever met. And they are, because they're taking inventory. The metaphor, you're a piano. They're learning which keys produce which sounds. They're figuring out the exact combination of notes that makes you sing, makes you cry, makes you stay. And once they know the song, they've built a psychological map of your entire emotional landscape. And you know they like hiking and have a complicated relationship with their mother. Level 3, the vulnerabilities. Let's get specific about what they're looking for, because it's not random, it's a checklist. Trait 1. You see potential. Someone shows you their worst self. Most people run. You think, but look at who they could be. You fall in love with possibilities, with futures, with the person they might become if only someone loved them enough. Here's the truth they're counting on. That person doesn't exist. You're not seeing potential. You're projecting your own goodness onto a blank wall and calling it a person. Trait 2. You give the benefit of the doubt. Red flag? Maybe they were just stressed. Cruel comment? They probably didn't mean it. Broken promise. Things come up. You explain away behavior that should terrify you. You create elaborate justifications for inexcusable actions. You're so committed to seeing the good that you refuse to see the truth. The implication: your generosity becomes their camouflage. They hide their worst self behind your willingness to believe the best. Trait 3. You're fluent in emotional language. You can talk about feelings. You can articulate what's happening inside you. You believe that communication solves everything. That if you just explain clearly enough, feel deeply enough, love hard enough, the other person will understand and change. But they're not speaking the same language. You're bringing poetry to a conversation where they're bringing strategy. You're trying to connect. They're trying to win. Trait 4. You feel responsible for other people's feelings. When they're sad, you fix it. When they're angry, you calm them. When they're distant, you chase. You've learned somewhere along the way that your job is to manage the emotional climate of everyone around you. If someone's unhappy, it must be your fault. If someone's struggling, it must be your job to help. The Dark Triad individual doesn't just notice this, they exploit it. They'll be sad on purpose just to watch you scramble. They'll be angry just to watch you appease. They'll be distant just to watch you chase. Your sense of responsibility becomes their remote control. The trap of compassion. Here's where it gets really painful. All of these traits, the empathy, the hope, the responsibility, the emotional fluency, these are beautiful things. They make you a good friend, a loving partner, a decent human being. In a healthy relationship, they're superpower. But in a relationship with a Dark Triad individual, their vulnerabilities, it's like being the most generous person in a city of beggars. Your generosity is beautiful, but it also makes you a target. Everyone wants what you have, and not everyone wants it nicely. The hidden truth. Dark personalities don't just happen to land on empaths. They seek them out. They're drawn to emotional people the way moths are drawn to flame. Not because they want to be warm, because they want to watch something burn. The selection process. Think about your past relationships. The ones that worked. The healthy ones. They probably felt boring. At least at first. No fireworks, no intensity. No can't eat, can't sleep obsession. Just steady, consistent, slightly dull connection. Now think about the Dark Triad relationship. Fireworks from day one. Intensity that felt like destiny. Connection that felt like fate. You thought, finally. This is what everyone's been talking about. Here's the question you need to sit with. Why does intensity feel like home to you? Because it shouldn't. Healthy love is calm. Healthy love is boring. Healthy love is someone who texts you back consistently and shows up when they say they will and doesn't make you question your sanity. But if you grew up with chaos, if your childhood was unpredictable, if love was conditional, if you had to earn affection by managing someone else's emotions, then calm feels foreign. Calm feels wrong. Calm feels like something's missing. And intensity feels like home. Because home was always on fire. Real talk. You weren't just the perfect target for them. You were the perfect target for yourself. Your history, your wounds, your patterns, they all conspired to make their chaos feel familiar. And familiar, for better or worse, feels safe. The good news. Here's the part that matters. None of this is your fault. You didn't ask to be targeted. You didn't deserve what happened. Your empathy isn't a character flaw. It's a gift that was stolen and used against you. But here's the other part. The harder part. Awareness changes the power dynamic. Once you know why you were targeted, you can stop being targetable. Once you understand your patterns, you can interrupt them. Once you see the trap, you can stop walking into it. You can learn to pause when intensity shows up and ask, is this love or is this performance? You can learn to notice when someone's vulnerability feels like a test and refuse to take the bait. You can learn to let people earn your trust slowly, over time, through consistency and reliability, not through fireworks and intensity. You can learn that your empathy is a gift you give to people who've proven they deserve it, not a toll you pay to everyone who asks. The shift. This is where the book changes. We've spent 9 chapters understanding them, their traits, their tactics, their strategies. We've looked deep into the Dark Triad and seen how they operate. Now it's time to look at you, not as a target, not as a victim, not as someone who is broken and exploited, but as someone who can learn, someone who can heal, someone who can build the kind of life and love. That doesn't require setting yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. The predators will always be out there. That doesn't change, but you can stop being prey. Chapter 10. Breaking the Trauma Bond. You're 6 weeks out, maybe 6 months, maybe 6 years. You know they were toxic. You've read the articles, you've talked to the therapist, you've made the lists of all the terrible things they did, you've got evidence, testimony, ironclad case that this person was bad for you in every possible way. And still at 2 a.m., you reach for your phone to text them. Still you hear a song and wonder if they're listening too. Still you check their social media. Still you hope they'll call. Still you miss them with a physical ache that makes no goddamn sense given everything you know. Here's what's happening that nobody explains. You're not missing them. You're missing the hit. And that hit, that's not love. That's addiction, the slot machine in your chest. Let's talk about how trauma bonds actually work. Remember the love bombing at the beginning? The intensity? The feeling that you'd finally found someone who saw you, wanted you, understood you completely. That wasn't connection, that was a loading dose. They gave you just enough of what you wanted. Attention, affection, validation, to get you hooked. Then they slowly, systematically reduced the dosage. The good days got further apart. The bad days got closer together. But every time you were ready to leave, every time you'd finally had enough, they'd pull out another good day, a text that made you laugh, a night that felt like the beginning, an apology that seemed so sincere, and you'd stay. Of course you'd stay, because that good day proved that the good version of them still existed, that the person you fell for was still in there somewhere, that if you just tried harder, loved harder, were harder, you could bring them back for good. The metaphor, your brain on a trauma bond looks exactly like your brain on cocaine, literally. The same neural pathways, the same chemical reactions, the same desperate craving for a hit that you know is killing you. The science of crazy, let's get technical for a minute, because understanding the mechanics is the first step to breaking the hold. Intermittent reinforcement is a conditioning schedule where rewards are given unpredictably. Sometimes you get the prize, sometimes you don't. You never know which pull of the lever will pay out. B.F. Skinner, the guy who put pigeons in boxes, discovered something disturbing. Pigeons who got pellets randomly? They pecked until they collapsed. They pecked themselves raw. They pecked like their lives depended on it, because they never knew when the next pellet might come. That's you. That's what they've done to you. The good days are the pellets. The bad days are the empty pulls. And you keep pecking, keep trying, keep hoping, because somewhere in your addicted brain you believe the next pull might be the jackpot. Real talk, you're not in love. You're in a variable reward schedule, and the only way to win is to stop playing. Stage 1. The chemistry. Let's look at what's actually happening inside your body. When they're good, when they text back, when they're affectionate, when they show up, your brain releases dopamine. Pleasure, reward, this feels amazing, this feels like finally being seen. When they're bad, when they disappear, when they're cruel, when they withdraw, your brain releases cortisol and adrenaline. Stress, panic, this feels terrible, this feels like dying. Here's the cruel part. Your brain starts to confuse the two. The stress becomes part of the reward cycle. The anxiety becomes anticipation. The panic becomes proof that they matter. You get addicted to the roller coaster itself, not just the highs. The lows become unbearable, which makes the highs feel even higher by comparison. You're not chasing happiness anymore. You're chasing relief, and relief from agony feels just as good as joy. Better maybe, because joy is expected. Relief is a surprise. The implication, they don't have to make you happy. They just have to make the pain stop, and they will occasionally, just enough to keep you hooked. Just enough to remind you that they hold the antidote to the poison they injected. Stage 2, the withdrawal. When you finally leave, or try to leave, something terrifying happens. You go into withdrawal, not metaphorically. Actually, literally. Your brain, which has been flooded with stress chemicals and reward chemicals in chaotic patterns, suddenly goes quiet. No more highs, no more lows, just flatness. And flatness feels like depression. You think you're missing them. You think you've made a mistake. You think maybe it wasn't that bad. Maybe you overreacted. Maybe you should go back. What's actually happening? Your brain is recalibrating. It's healing, and healing hurt. The metaphor. Imagine you've been living in a house with a malfunctioning fire alarm that goes off randomly, sometimes for hours, sometimes for seconds, never with warning. You're constantly on edge, constantly alert, constantly ready for the next scream. Then someone turns the alarm off. The silence doesn't feel peaceful. It feels wrong. It feels like something's missing. You lie awake listening to the nothing, waiting for the noise that never comes. And part of you wants the noise back because at least the noise was familiar. At least the noise meant you were alive. That's withdrawal. That's the silence after the alarm. and it will drive you crazy if you don't understand what's happening. Stage 3. The ghosting paradox. Here's one of the cruelest tricks of the trauma bond. When they finally leave, or when you finally manage to stay gone, they don't always chase. Sometimes they just disappear. No closure, no explanation, no final conversation, just silence. The person who once consumed your every thought becomes a ghost, and you're left holding all the questions, all the feelings, all the unfinished business. This isn't accidental. This is strategic. By leaving without closure, they ensure that you never fully move on. Your brain keeps trying to complete the story, to find the ending, to make sense of the senseless. And because there is no ending, you stay trapped in the middle forever. You replay conversations. You analyze texts. You wonder what you could have done differently. You create elaborate theories about why they left, what they're thinking, whether they'll come back. And all of that mental energy, all that obsession, that's still attention. That's still connection. That's still supply. They don't have to be with you to control you. They just have to be gone in a way that keeps you wondering. The hidden truth. No closure is a form of closure. It's just the worst kind. It's the kind that says, you aren't even worth a goodbye. Stage 4. The trap of memory. Your memory is not your friend right now. The brain, in its infinite wisdom, has a protective mechanism. It forgets pain faster than pleasure. This is great for surviving childbirth. It's terrible for recovering from toxic relationships. You remember the good times vividly. The vacation, the inside joke, the night they held you and said all the right things. You remember the bad times vaguely. The fight, the silent treatment, the thing they said that you've mostly pushed down because it hurt too much to hold. This is called fading effect bias, and it's the enemy of recovery. Your brain is literally editing the relationship to make it look better than it was. It's deleting the pain and amplifying the pleasure. And every time you think, maybe it wasn't that bad, you're falling for your own brain's survival mechanism. Real talk, your brain isn't trying to hurt you. It's trying to protect you from the memory of pain. But in doing so, it's setting you up to go back, to try again, to get hurt worse. You have to consciously, deliberately fight your own memory. You have to write down the bad things, reread them. Force yourself to remember why you left, because your brain will lie to you, and those lies will kill you, the breaking point. So how do you break a trauma bond? How do you walk away from an addiction that lives in your chest and whispers your abuser's name at 3 a.m.? Step 1. Go no contact, not low contact, not just checking their social media, not we can be friends eventually. No contact, block them on everything, delete the numbers, throw away the letters. Make it impossible to reach them or be reached. You cannot break an addiction while still sampling the drug. You cannot heal a wound while picking at the scab. No contact isn't punishment for them, it's medicine for you. Step 2. Sit in the withdrawal. It's going to suck. It's going to suck so bad you'll think you're dying. You're not dying, you're healing. The difference is almost impossible to feel but absolutely essential to understand. When the craving hits, when you want to text them, check their profile, drive by their house, sit with it. Don't act, just feel. Notice where it lives in your body. Notice what it's telling you. Notice that it passes. It always passes. Step 3. Build a new casino. Your brain needs new reward patterns, new sources of dopamine, new things to look forward to. This is why therapists always say, exercise and hobbies and connect with friends. It's not because they're boring. It's because your brain needs new slot machines, new ways to get the good chemicals without the poison. Find something that lights you up, something that has nothing to do with them, something that reminds you who you were before they got their hooks in. Step 4. Forgive yourself. This is the hardest one. You're going to feel stupid, embarrassed, ashamed that you fell for it, that you stayed, that because you have a heart that wants to love, and a brain that wants to bond, and a history that made their chaos feel like home. None of that is your fault. All of it is your responsibility to heal. The truth they don't want you to know. Here's what the Dark Triad individual never wants you to figure out. You can live without them, not just survive. Live, thrive. Laugh again, love again, trust again. The bond feels unbreakable because they designed it to feel that way. They engineered your dependency. They exploited your empathy. They turned your love into a cage. But cages have doors, and you have hands. And the door was never locked. You just forgot you could push. The uncomfortable healing from a trauma bond requires something uncomfortable. It requires admitting that the person you loved never existed. It requires grieving a ghost. It requires accepting that the good times weren't evidence of their love. They were evidence of their skill. They were good at making you feel loved because they'd practiced on 100 other people before you. It requires sitting with the most painful truth of all. They don't miss you. They miss what you gave them. They miss the supply. They miss the attention. But you as a person, as a unique, irreplaceable human being, they don't think about you at all. And that's not cruelty. That's just how they're built. Your choice isn't whether this hurts. It hurts. It's going to hurt. Your choice is whether you let the hurt turn into healing or let it turn into going back. Chapter 11. Becoming emotionally unavailable to manipulation. Let me ask you something that might make you uncomfortable. After everything you've been through, the charm that wasn't real, the gaslighting that made you question your mind, the trauma bond that felt like love, what's the one thing you're most afraid of becoming? If you're like most survivors, the answer is simple: cold. You're terrified that protecting yourself means closing yourself off, that building walls means becoming heartless, that saying never again means you'll never feel again. You look at the Dark Triad, at their emptiness, their detachment, their inability to connect, and you think, I never want to be like that. Good, you shouldn't. But here's the distinction nobody explains. There's a difference between being cold and being clear, and learning that difference is how you become emotionally unavailable to manipulation without becoming emotionally unavailable to life. The immune system analogy. Think about your physical body for a second. Your immune system's job isn't to keep everything out. That's impossible. You're breathing air, touching surfaces, interacting with millions of microbes every day. Most of them are harmless. Some are even helpful. Your immune system's job is to distinguish, to tell the difference between a friendly bacteria in your gut and a hostile virus trying to kill you, to welcome the first and attack the second. That's what healthy emotional boundaries look like. Not walls, not isolation, not coldness. Discernment. The ability to let the right things in and keep the wrong things out. To stay open to connection while staying closed to manipulation. To be warm with people who have earned warmth and neutral with people who haven't. The metaphor, cold, is a deep freeze. Nothing gets in. Nothing gets out. You're preserved, but you're also frozen. Clear as a moat with a working drawbridge. You're protected, but you can still let people in when they prove they're not invaders. The problem with nice. Here's what the Dark Triad knows that you don't. Nice people are predictable. Not because they're stupid, because they're consistent. They respond to pain with compassion. They respond to vulnerability with support. They respond to conflict with attempts to understand. If you're a predator looking for prey, predictability is gold. It means you know exactly how your target will react. You can plan around them. You can exploit their patterns. The moment you become unpredictable, the moment your responses are based on discernment rather than reflex, you become a much harder target. Real talk. You know how they always say, kill them with kindness? Worst advice ever. Kindness isn't bamabin, it's an invitation. If you're kind to everyone indiscriminately, you're inviting everyone in, including the people who will burn the house down. Level 1. The pause. The first skill of emotional unavailability to manipulation is the simplest and hardest thing you'll ever learn. When someone makes you feel something, especially something intense, you don't act, you don't react, you don't respond. You pause. That flattery that makes you feel special? Pause. That sob story that makes you want to save them? Pause. That accusation that makes you want to defend yourself? Pause. That silent treatment that makes you want to chase? Pause. Just stop. Breathe. Let the feeling wash through you without letting it wash you away. Here's what happens during the pause. You separate feeling from action. The Dark Triad relies on your feelings being immediate and overwhelming. They need you to react before you think. They need your empathy to bypass your logic. The pause interrupts that. It creates space between stimulus and response, and in that space you get to choose. The implication, you can't control what you feel, you can control what you do. The pause is where that control lives. Level 2, the data test. Once you've paused, you need a way to evaluate what's happening. Enter the data test. Instead of asking, how does this make me feel? which is exactly what they want you to ask. You ask 3 different questions. Question 1. Does their behavior match their words? They say they love you. Do they show up when it's inconvenient? They say they respect you. Do they listen when you say no? They say they've changed. Is there evidence or just promises? Words are free. Words are infinite. Words cost nothing. Behavior costs everything. If the behavior doesn't match, the words are irrelevant. Question 2. Is this a pattern or a one-time thing? Everyone has bad days. Everyone makes mistakes. The question isn't whether they messed up once. It's whether there's a pattern of messing up in the same way, with the same excuses, followed by the same apologies, followed by the same behavior. Patterns are predictions. If you see a pattern, believe it. Question 3. Would I advise a friend to stay in this situation? This is the magic question, the one that bypasses all your justifications and rationalizations. You wouldn't let your best friend stay with someone who makes them feel crazy. You wouldn't tell your sibling to give just one more chance to the person who's already had 40. You wouldn't look at someone you love and say, maybe if you try harder, they'll change. So why are you accepting that for yourself? The metaphor. Your feelings are the weather. They change, they're real, but they're not reliable navigation tools. Your data is the map. You don't steer the ship based on whether it's sunny. You steer based on where the rocks are. Level 3, the response. After the pause, after the data test, you get to choose your response. And here's where clear separates from cold. Cold responds with punishment, with withdrawal, with now you'll see what it's like. Cold is about revenge, about proving a point, about making them feel what you felt. Clear responds with information, with boundaries, with this is what I need and what I won't accept. Clear says, when you do X, I feel Y. I need Z. If you can't do Z, then I can't continue this relationship. Clear doesn't threaten. Clear doesn't manipulate. Clear doesn't play games. Clear just states facts and lets the other person choose how to respond. If they respond with respect and change, great, the relationship continues. If they respond with defensiveness, gaslighting, or more of the same, great, you have your answer, and you act accordingly. The hidden truth clear is actually kinder than cold. Cold leaves people guessing. Cold is its own form of manipulation. Clear gives people the information they need to make their own choices. It's honest. It's direct. It's respectful of you and of them. Level 4, the exit. Sometimes despite your clarity, despite your boundaries, despite your best efforts, the answer is clear. This person cannot be in your life. And here's where most people get stuck. They know they should leave. They know it's over. They know staying is self-destruction. But they're afraid of what leaving means. Afraid of being alone. Afraid of hurting the other person. Afraid of admitting it failed. Afraid of the unknown. Real talk. Fear of being alone is how people end up dying slowly in relationships that already died years ago. Fear of hurting them is how you get hurt over and over by someone who doesn't share that fear. Fear of failure is how you fail the only person who actually matters in this equation. Future you, leaving isn't cruel. Staying when you know you should go, that's cruel to yourself. To the life you could be living. To the person you could become. The new operating system. Becoming emotionally unavailable to manipulation isn't about becoming hard. It's about becoming sovereign. You become the authority on your own life. You become the gatekeeper of your own heart. You become the one who decides who gets access. Under what conditions, for how long. You stop outsourcing your self-worth to people who have no idea what it's worth. You stop letting other people's chaos become your emergency. You stop setting yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. You start trusting yourself, your perceptions, your boundaries, your ability to survive discomfort. You start believing that you can handle being disliked, that you can handle conflict, that you can handle someone being angry because you said no. You start understanding that your peace is worth more than their approval, the fear that remains. But here's the thing about this new clarity. It's going to scare people, not the good people. They'll appreciate knowing where they stand. They'll rise to meet your standards or gracefully accept that you're not a match. The other people, the ones who benefited from your fuzziness, they're going to lose their minds. They'll call you cold. They'll say you've changed. They'll accuse you of being heartless, selfish, guarded. They'll use every word they can think of to make you doubt yourself and go back to being the person they could manipulate. and part of you will want to believe them. Part of you will hear cold and panic, because being cold is exactly what you never wanted to become. The distinction: cold is what they call you when they can't control you anymore. Cold is the name they give to boundaries that inconvenience them. Cold is the label they stick on anyone who refuses to be fuel for their fire. You're not cold, you're just not on fire anymore. And to people who are burning, that looks exactly the same. The final truth: here's what nobody tells you about becoming emotionally unavailable to manipulation. It's not about them at all, it's about you. About finally treating yourself with the same compassion you've been giving away to people who never deserved it. About becoming the person who protects you the way you've always protected everyone else. It's about realizing that your empathy isn't a community resource. It's not a public park where anyone can come and take what they need. It's a garden, and gardens need gates. Not to keep everything out, to keep the deer from eating the roses. You can still be warm. You can still be open. You can still love deeply, give generously, connect authentically. You just can't do it with everyone. And that's not cold, that's clear. Chapter 12. The Dark Triad Inside You. Let's get uncomfortable. For 11 chapters, we've been doing something very satisfying. We've been pointing fingers, we've been naming names. We've been building a clear, clean line between them. The predators, the manipulators, the people who feel nothing. And us, the empaths, the victims, the good guys. Feels good, right? Clear, clean, safe. Here's the problem with that line: it's bullshit. The Dark Triad isn't out there. It's in here. In you, in me, in every human being who's ever lived. And before you close the book and call me a heretic, hear me out. Because this isn't about letting them off the hook. It's about something much more important, giving you the rest of your power back, the shadow zoo. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist who gave the world more interesting dinner party conversation than almost anyone, had a concept called the shadow. The shadow is everything about yourself that you refuse to acknowledge, the parts of your personality that don't fit with who you think you are, the impulses, desires, and traits that you've shoved into the basement of your psyche, because they're too ugly to display in the front parlor. For most of us, the Dark Triad traits live in the shadow. You don't want to be narcissistic? Fine. Your egoism, your need for admiration, your secret belief that you're special, into the basement. You don't want to be Machiavellian? Fine. Your strategic thoughts, your moments of manipulation, your quiet satisfaction when you get one over on someone, into the basement. You don't want to be psychopathic? Fine. Your coldness, your moments of not caring, your secret relief when someone who was draining you finally leaves, into the basement. The problem with basements? They're not soundproof. And the things you shove down there don't disappear. They just start running the house from below while you pretend you're in charge upstairs. The metaphor: you think you're the captain of a nice, tidy ship. But there's a whole crew in the hold, angry, hungry, and steering while you're busy polishing the brass. And every now and then they mutiny. And you have no idea why you just snapped, just lied, just didn't care. Level 1, the narcissist in you. Let's start with the one that's going to sting the most. You have narcissistic traits. I know you're a good person. You care about others. You give and give and give. You're nothing like them. But ask yourself a different set of questions. When someone doesn't notice your effort, does it bother you? When you're in a group, do you want to be seen as the interesting one? When you help someone, do you want them to appreciate it? When you're wrong, do you feel defensive? When you look in the mirror, do you check yourself out? Just a little? That's not pathology. That's human. Narcissism, in healthy doses, is just self-worth. It's the part of you that knows you matter, that wants to be seen, that refuses to disappear into the background. It's the engine of ambition, the source of confidence, the reason you don't let people walk all over you. The problem isn't that you have it. The problem is when you pretend you don't. Because when you pretend you don't need admiration, you never learn to get it in healthy ways. When you pretend you don't care about being seen, you let yourself become invisible. When you deny your own worth, you end up seeking it from people who will never give it. Real talk, the healthiest people I know aren't the ones who've eliminated their narcissism. They're the ones who've made friends with it, who say, yes, I want to be seen. Yes, I want to matter. Now, how do I get that in a way that doesn't hurt anyone, including me? Level 2. The Machiavellian in you. Now let's talk about strategy. You've been manipulated, you know how awful it feels. You would never ever do that to someone else. But have you ever withheld information to make yourself look better? Have you ever said what someone wanted to hear instead of what was true? Have you ever played just a little dumb to get out of responsibility? Have you ever strategically shared a secret to build closeness? Have you ever made someone like you because you needed something from them? Welcome to the human race. Population U. Machiavellianism in healthy doses is just social intelligence. It's knowing that not everything needs to be said, that timing matters, that relationships involve strategy, whether you admit it or not. It's the part of you that navigates, that plans, that thinks ahead. The problem isn't that you have it. The problem is when you pretend you don't. Because when you pretend you don't strategize, you strategize badly. You manipulate without admitting you're manipulating, which means you never check yourself. You play games while telling yourself you're above games, which means you're the worst kind of player, the one who doesn't know they're playing. The implication: the people who do the most damage with manipulation aren't the ones who admit they're strategic. They're the ones who've convinced themselves they're just honest while subtly engineering every outcome to their advantage. Level 3. The psychopath in you, this is the one nobody wants to touch. You have psychopathic traits, not the kind that make you kill people, the kind that make you human. Have you ever walked away from a relationship and felt nothing? Just relief? Have you ever watched someone cry and felt impatient instead of sympathetic? Have you ever had a thought so cold it scared you? Have you ever ended something and never looked back, not even once? Psychopathy in healthy doses is just emotional regulation. It's the part of you that can stay calm in a crisis, that can make hard decisions without falling apart, that can protect yourself when caring would destroy you, that can walk away from things that aren't good for you and actually stay gone. The problem isn't that you have it. The problem is when you pretend you don't. Because when you pretend you never feel cold, you never learn to manage the coldness. You end up staying in situations that require warmth you don't have, pretending to feel things you don't feel, draining yourself trying to be someone you're not. The hidden truth: the healthiest people aren't the ones who feel everything deeply all the time. They're the ones who know when to feel and when to protect, who can access warmth when it's called for and coldness when it's necessary, who aren't afraid of their own detachment, the integration. Here's what Jung knew that most self-help books miss. The things you repress don't go away. They go feral. Your unacknowledged narcissism becomes entitlement. Your unacknowledged Machiavellianism becomes passive aggression. Your unacknowledged psychopathy becomes emotional numbness that you can't control. The only way to make these traits safe is to bring them into the light. To say, yes, I want attention. How do I get it honestly? To say, yes, I think strategically. How do I do it ethically? To say, yes, I can be cold. How do I use that to protect, not to harm? The metaphor: these traits are like fire. Fire left unchecked burns down houses. Fire denied doesn't exist, until it ignites anyway and burns down different houses. But fire contained, fire respected, fire used deliberately. That's heat. That's light. That's power. The danger of purity. Here's what the Dark Triad individuals have that you don't. They've integrated their darkness. They know they're strategic. They know they're cold. They know they want admiration. They don't pretend otherwise. They've made peace with their shadows. Not because they're enlightened, but because they never judged them in the first place. You've spent your whole life trying to be good, pure, above all that. And in doing so, you've made yourself vulnerable to people who aren't afraid of their own darkness. They operate from their whole selves. You operate from half. They have all their tools. You've thrown half of yours away because they felt bad. Who do you think wins in that matchup? Real talk. This isn't about becoming them. This is about becoming whole. About reclaiming the parts of yourself you've disowned. About having access to the full range of human response, including the responses that feel uncomfortable. The balanced triad. Imagine a version of you with integrated darkness. Your narcissism becomes self-worth. You know you matter. You don't beg for attention because you give it to yourself. You don't chase validation because you have your own. You're not desperate, and desperation is what predators smell. Your Machiavellianism becomes discernment. You read people accurately. You don't ignore red flags because you're giving them the benefit of the doubt. You see strategy coming because you have strategy yourself. You're not naive, and naivety is what predators exploit. Your psychopathy becomes boundaries. You can walk away, you can stay gone. You can watch someone cry without crumbling because you know those tears might be manipulation. You can be alone without panicking because you're enough. You're not trapped, and trapping is how predators feed. This version of you isn't cold. This version is protected. This version isn't manipulative. This version is aware. This version isn't narcissistic. This version is whole. The final lesson. We started this book with a simple premise. The Dark Triad is real, it's dangerous, and it's probably closer than you think. We've spent 11 chapters understanding their traits, their tactics, their targets. We've learned how they operate in love, in work, in families, in friendships. We've learned how to spot them, survive them, and eventually break free from them. But none of that matters if you don't learn the final lesson. The darkness isn't only out there, it's in you, in me, in everyone. And pretending it doesn't exist doesn't make you safe. It makes you prey. The people who feel nothing aren't dangerous because they have darkness. They're dangerous because their darkness has no light, no balance, no check. They're all fire, no water. All strategy, no heart. All cold, no warmth. You have both. That's your advantage. That's your power. Not purity, not innocence, not being too good to see what's coming. Integration. Knowing your own capacity for darkness means you recognize it in others. Having your own strategic mind means you see their strategies coming. Having your own coldness means you can access it when you need to protect yourself. Power isn't about becoming them. It's about recognizing them. Without becoming blind, the choice, so here you are. At the end of this book, holding everything you've learned, you can go back to pretending, back to believing the line between them and us is clean and clear, back to being surprised over and over when the darkness finds you. Or you can do something harder. You can look in the mirror and meet the stranger there. The one with the narcissistic hunger, the Machiavellian strategy, the psychopathic cold. You can shake their hand. You can thank them for protecting you when you needed it. You can tell them they're part of the team now. And then you can walk back out into the world. Not as prey, not as predator, but as someone whole. Someone who sees clearly because they've stopped pretending. Someone who can't be controlled because they're not hiding from themselves. Someone who finally understands that the light is only half the story. And the dark is where the roots grow. This is where the book leaves you, aware, alert, and armed with understanding. You now recognize the patterns, the tactics, and the warning signs. You can see manipulation before it takes hold. You can protect your mind, your heart, and your choices. Remember, knowledge is power. Awareness is freedom, and staying unshakable doesn't mean closing yourself off. It means choosing clearly who you allow into your life and why. If this book helped you see the world differently, take action. Subscribe so you never miss a deep dive into the human mind. Like if you found a new insight that actually matters. Comment your thoughts, experiences, or questions. Your voice could be the next example we analyze. This isn't just a book. It's a toolkit. Use it, practice it, and stay ahead of the people who don't feel, but still try to control everything.